Introducing Nose to Tail, a podcast where we explore the world of aviation lifecycle solutions, insights, and more. Presented by Jet Midwest.
Welcome back to the Nose to Tail podcast. I'm Patrick Kraus, COO at Jet Midwest. I'm here with Dianna. Dianna, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
You know, Dianna, it's interesting to get an introduction to you, and you've written a book, and you've got an interesting career. Why don't you get us started by letting us understand how you got into aviation and really how you developed your passion?
Well, I had no plans to be in aviation. I was in college. My so-called fiance came back from Vietnam and decided after he got home that he didn't want to marry me anymore. And I had quit college. I didn't have a job. And back then, being a stewardess was a big deal. And when the music started playing Up, Up, and Away with TWA, my mother said, go get a job. And that's what happened.
That's fantastic. So to talk to me a little bit about what the training was like at that point in time to become a flight attendant.
It was an intense 6 weeks at Bridge Training Academy here in Overland Park, Kansas. It was a brand new facility. It was just built. It was the largest and most inclusive facility in the world to train both pilots, flight attendants, and everybody else that worked in the airline. Every day, 8 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night, classes all day long. You made a 90 or you were out. You never gained weight or you were out. I think at that point we had 7 airplanes we were studying. So yes, it was an intense deal.
In a typical aviation, an airline, right, they have aging fleets. They have their older fleet, and then they have the new generation for them at the time. So at that point in time in your career, what was that aging fleet? And then what was the new emerging fleet for TWA?
Well, I was fortunate enough to get to fly the Convair 880 one time, and I swore I'd never fly it again.
I'm going to ask you about that now. So what was it about the Convair that was made you happy that it was one and only flight?
Well, the Convair 880 was purchased by Howard Hughes to make up for the fact that he couldn't get any Boeing 707s because United was having all theirs made. So we were behind the 8 ball on that. So the Convair 880 was named that because it traveled 880 feet per second. The thing I didn't like about it was it did not have the slides in the housing of the door. They were actually in a little box next to the door. So you'd open the door in an emergency, and then you'd stand over and you'd open that box, flip the slide out, and hope it inflated. And there was just something unnerving about that.
And compared to the doors now, where it's attached to the door, so when the door opens, it's
Automatic.
automatic. That's that could be a little unnerving having to chuck that thing out in the water there.
Right.
So if that was the aging fleet for TWA, what was the newest generation fleet that you got your training on at the time?
My favorite was the 747. That was my second flight. I was trained on it at the academy, but nobody could ever train you to fly on a 747 the first time because it was absolutely magnificent.
Now, in your career, or I guess in your life, had you traveled at all prior to that? Was aviation something that you did, or did you take road trips in the car?
I made one round trip from LA up to Seattle and back. That was it.
So jumping on a jumbo jet for the first time must have been just awe-inspiring.
Well, it wasn't just me, it was the passengers, because you got to remember that the Boeing 747 wasn't just the largest airplane in the world at that point for commercial travel, but they had the overhead storage bins. They were the first. So when people came on the plane, they didn't know what they were. So we spent minutes trying to just get them to go down the aisle so we could get everybody else on. But it was just awe-inspiring. What a beautiful airplane. And it had dual lanes, so it was the largest plane out there. And they just stood around with their mouths open, and we kept trying to force them down to their seats.
Probably took quite a while to board those airplanes, right?
It did.
So where was that flight headed?
My first flight went to Madrid, Spain. Not only was it my first flight, but I also evacuated it on the way home. We had what we thought was a fire in the number 4 engine, but it wasn't. It turned out to be a false positive, but we ended up evacuating.
Well, that's a good job of taking fresh training and putting it to work, right?
Yeah.
The little trial by fire, almost literally.
Went behind the ear training right there.
Yeah. So how big was the cruise? That was a 747-100 series?
I'm pretty sure that's what we flew. We didn't fly the 400s for quite some time. They were they were adapted for cargo too, but To my knowledge, it was the 100. I don't know. That's one thing we didn't study was the series.
Yeah, I don't think there was much type rating difference between the 100, 200, and 300 because I think they're mostly the same outside of the engines, maybe. Well, that's awesome. And in your travels, maybe what was it like for a young person to be able to go and experience? How old were you when you landed in Madrid for the first time?
20.
I assume you've got some amazing adventure stories.
I do. They're all in the book. But yes, I always felt like the Forrest Gump of TWA. There were people out there that would not fly with me because something always went wrong on my airplanes. And it really has nothing to do with me, but yes, it was exciting. Landing in Europe for the very first time was incredible. I mean, I held my breath when we landed because I was just so excited to be there.
So what kind of service, how would you compare the service from when you started your career to the service maybe that we have now on our international flights?
I don't think there's any comparison. We served 3 hot meals in coach choice. You get a choice with wine and anything else that you want on there that we have on the menu. But in first class, we had a choice of 8. We served Chateaubriand in first class and cookies Saint Jacques and lobster thermidor, and it just went on and on and on. And it was just one service, and then we had a second service after that, prior to landing.
That must have been a pretty amazing time period to be able to be flying in first class and having that experience. So that generation of flight attendant, you guys were hostesses.
Mm-hmm.
So how long were you a hostess?
I stayed with TWA from 1970 to 1986.
Okay. And then how did you transition your career? What triggered that? And then where did you take your career?
Well, I stayed with TWA, and I eventually became an international service manager on the 747s, which was quite exciting. And then when I left TWA, I bought a franchise, a Uniglobe travel agency. I couldn't get rid of the jet fuel in my veins. That didn't last very long because Delta ran us out of business, ran all the travel agencies out of business, took commission from 10% down to 0 for tickets. So then I thought, well, I might as well, if I can't beat them, I might as well join them. So then I started working for Delta and did that for 16 years.
Wow. And, 2 of North America's biggest airlines. That's fantastic in terms of a career. Now, when you're a travel agent, how did you take your knowledge and things you understood about aviation and travel? What was that thing you were selling the most? What was that exciting thing you were selling to people?
Knowledge, experience, making sure that you as the passenger didn't go to cities that I knew were probably going to have cancellation delayed due to weather. There's just a whole lot that goes into traveling that people don't take into consideration. You really need to watch the radar in the world to see what's going on before you pick a flight, because some airlines can't handle bad weather and some airlines are just used to it. So
Absolutely. Now, were you always stationed here? Or are you stationed out at JFK? What did that look like for you as a hostess?
I started out at JFK. I lived in a studio apartment with 5 other women, payphone on the wall, 1 bed, 1 couch, and the floor, and prayed that the phone rang, because when I first started, the 747 just came out. I started in 70. It started in 70. They went from it needing 5 flight attendants to 16 on that airplane. So we had women all over the place in New York getting ready to fly out. We were brand new. The phone rang. We got on it. We were both domestic and international flight attendants, which is rare in the airline. You have to normally speak a language to be international, but because of this new airplane, we were everything. So when the phone rang, you never knew where you were going to go.
Was that exciting or nerve-wracking?
It was exciting. We didn't care. Our suitcase was always packed. You always had a bathing suit, a pair of pants, a shirt, and a lot of nylons, because we had to wear nylons. If you got a runner, you better change them fast.
Well, certainly back in that generation, the guidance from HR might have been a little different than it is today. I would say. I'm pretty sure that there's no weight restrictions here in North America for our flight attendants. Let's talk about JFK real quick. So, as you're probably aware, the TWA had a terminal building there, and a couple of years ago they transitioned that into
Hotel.
and there's a little small museum there and restaurants and things. And It is a 1960s design for sure.
Hmm.
Did you get to operate out of that terminal?
That's exactly where I worked out of.
Have you been back to
I haven't.
you should go back for sure. I was traveling to Iceland maybe a year and a half ago with one of my colleagues, and we specifically picked a long layover at JFK so that we could go and walk through and have something to eat and kind of check it out. For all of our listeners out there who aren't aware, Jet Midwest and our group of companies occupy the old TWA overhaul facility here in Kansas City, both wide body, narrow body, as well as the warehousing and shop facility. And one of our buildings is actually designed the same, sort of a space age looking design. So I would encourage all of you, if you have a chance to go to JFK and go to that old TWA terminal and have yourself a cheeseburger and sit in there. And it's a pretty cool experience. In fact, oh shoot, what was the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio?
Catch Me If You
Catch Me If You
Can.
Can. So that's the terminal that he walks down
Hmm.
to go through there at the end.
Hmm.
So that's got to be a pretty cool experience. So I'll encourage you to go and um, maybe it's not the greatest cheeseburger in the world, but it's a great experience to go back and maybe relive a little of that.
Yeah, a lot of my friends have gone there. I don't know if I could do it. It would make me so sad. Those plush 3-inch carpets on the floor that we stumbled on and our 3.5-inch heels, but I missed it terribly. It was a beautiful place. It was beautiful.
So since we're talking about airports, and you've been to a lot of places, what is your favorite airport? Where was the place that if you could fly into that you would have sent your people to?
Amsterdam. I love Amsterdam. It is the most intriguing airport. You can buy anything, eat anything, hang out in it. It's a great airport. I love it. But my heart is in Rome. It'll always be in Rome.
Well, that's good. So Amsterdam for fun and your heart in Rome. That's for most of our listeners out there, they can probably contemplate what that might look like. As we transitioned your career, you go to Delta and help them. And essentially, you were providing services for Delta that were mirroring your
Customer service.
Okay, so describe that maybe for us of what that looked like.
Well, it's totally different when you were a flight attendant. Everything. Well, of course, I started out, everything was laid out for me, and I knew exactly what was expected of me. But to be a gate agent, counter agent, baggage service agent, cargo agent for a major airline is tough. And when you are a gate agent and you have to cancel a flight because you have no control, pilots don't have control, the weather's in charge. It's a very trying experience. And I'm glad that I did what I did before as a customer service agent because it made it a whole lot easier for me because I had a lot more experience and I knew what to say to them, calm them down.
Yeah, it's amazing how good the training has to be to keep passengers calm. And now everybody's got a phone, so we see all of these challenges that happen on flights. They hit the internet pretty routinely, and social media to see some person is wigging out for whatever reason. A lot of kudos to all of those crew members who are having to put up with those things, and 99% of the time with perfect grace. But I can usually understand why that 1% probably happens. So, talk to me a little bit about after leaving Delta. Talk to me about what you've done since then.
Well, I took an opportunity to go to the TWA museum over at the old airport, MKC Airport, and check it out. And I volunteer there now, and it is absolutely wonderful. It's sort of like flying all over again because people are new to it. Some of them have never heard of TWA. Others are longing for it to come back. And we are fortunate enough to have the number 2 position in the world, in the United States as an aviation museum after the Smithsonian. And we continue to grow all the time.
Yeah, it's a great experience. And again, for any listeners, it's we would call it the downtown airport in Kansas City, just on the north side of downtown. What type of aircraft do you guys have there in the museum?
Well, in the museum, a real aircraft, all we have is an Electra that is loaned to us by a former captain's daughter. Across the way at the old TWA History Museum, there's a Connie over there that's owned by John Travolta. And they think there's a Martin 404. And there's other airplanes that I'm not familiar with that are sort of in pieces. But yeah, and we have facsimiles and trainers inside of our museum that you can actually feel like you're sitting on a real airplane.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. Did you get a chance to meet John?
No.
Okay. We were lucky enough to meet John this past winter, and obviously an aviation enthusiast worldwide is well known for that. So essentially, you've become a hostess at the museum.
I have. Yes, I am a tour guide. I enjoy it a lot. I really do, especially the children that don't have a clue what TWA stands for. And, people don't realize that TWA was a first class airline. Pan Am and TWA were the flag carriers for the United States. And thanks to Howard Hughes, we were able to do that. He took on the Congress to let us be a flag carrier after the war. And if anybody wants to see how that really worked, watch The Aviator with DiCaprio.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies, and again, it's great to be in this facility that was built by him and designed. And really, this facility was built more than 20 years before the airport was actually completed here at KCI. And so it's unique. Like, wow, what great forethought and understanding of what he needed. It's its own little city
Yes.
in a lot of ways. Had its own water treatment plant, its own power plant, and so it feels great to be able to extend the life of this facility and continue to do the same things here that he was doing. Not the airline side, I'm not that guy, but all of the other things that they were doing here, managing all of their own maintenance on both the aircraft, components, engines, and we've resurrected all of those things here in the last 15 years. So it's been a great journey for us.
I'd like to interject that a lot of the tour guides that we have in the museum are former maintenance crew for TWA. So they are just a fount of information. And when something breaks down, they're right there. One man in particular, on my 21st birthday, I had to spend, I think it was 12 or 15 hours on an airplane with passengers. No booze, by the way, because it was Sunday and our engine broke down. And rather than, there were no hotel rooms. It was summer 1970. There were, I think, 5 or 6 jets broken down. And the Queen said, "Get your airplane out of here and your people. We have no more hotels." So they flew a 747 in with a 5th engine on it. I never believed you could do that. But the guy that did that works with me at the museum. So it's pretty interesting for my birthday.
That is pretty wild. Oddly enough, in 2006, I was doing a buying run. There was an auction going on, and I had gone out to take a look at this stuff. It was in Delaware, and they had the pod that held the engine to be the 5th engine that goes on the 747. And I tried to buy it from them, and they ended up not selling it, but not to use it, but just the idea behind it was crazy.
I know.
It took me a lot of conversations just to find someone who understood what it was.
I remember the pilots going, "Look out the window, go look out the left side. There's your engine." We're like, "What?" And they got it on. It was just amazing. We have a joke we had a joke at TWA about how all the mechanics in Rome are driving around a Mercedes because there were 11,000 more screws on a 747 engine than the others. And sometimes they just forget to screw them down, or they would take forever for overtime. I'm sure the Italians don't appreciate this story, but the mechanics used to always laugh about it because to put the engine on took forever, just forever.
Well, you could either do it at home or you could be somewhere really amazing and take your time there. I've heard enough pilot stories of having challenges and squawking airplanes in places that they like to be. So it's not the first time I've heard that story. So maybe what is it about the museum that we could tell the folks out there that would really encourage them to come and experience it either for the first time or maybe if they haven't been for a while? What's new there?
Well, gee whiz. I don't think there's a lot of new right now. We're just upgrading all the things that we have. But the reason you want to come is you want to see TWA. TWA built Kansas City. I don't care what anyone says. If you look back in history, we were coming in here and bringing people in here. And I really believe with all my heart that should be our theme song because the people that live here can remember coming into that airport, smelling the coffee from Folgers, which is right over there, the factory. And I just think it's important for people that live in Kansas City to know a little history about it.
Yeah, it is, from the time that TWA, when they sold to American Airlines, I believe that was in 1999, really when American took over, that Kansas City wasn't their focal point. And from that point forward, and I had just gotten into aviation, from that point forward, the aviation in Kansas City did just slowly dwindle. And, there's a lot of support shops and resources that TWA had developed over decades. And those people didn't have a customer anymore. And that was really rough to see them have to either transition to a different role or completely shut down or move to a different location where they had a customer that was maybe more on demand. So that was challenging. And I think for me, like yourself, the passion in aviation is amazing. Like everybody, like you said, it's jet fuel in your veins, man. You can't get rid of it. And my hope when we moved into this facility in 2010, as we started moving in, American was exiting. And my hope was to turn this back into, I mean, not exactly what it was, but turn it into the newest version and really get aviation sprawling again in Kansas City. And I feel pretty good about the parking lot being full of cars and the ramp outside full of airplanes. I think there's 35 plus airplanes outside, either waiting for maintenance or something to happen to them. So hopefully we're carrying on the legacy a little bit and going to resurrect that. But it'd be great for people to go see kind of where it started at the museum. That'd be amazing.
I can tell you that when I drove in here, my heart started to palpitate because those big airplanes out there are amazing. All you need to do is just stick a TWA tail out of one of that hangar that we used to have. Remember?
Yep. Well, with the internet today, we can just Photoshop it, I think, and put some red tails on everything that was out there. So for all of our listeners out there, I appreciate the copy of your book. This is your book, Jump Seat, Jet Setting in the 70s. And tell us a little bit about, obviously, your career is probably your inspiration here. But maybe you can tell us a little bit more about, what really made you want to put this into book form and maybe one exciting story or theme that you want to come out of this book.
Well, I wrote the book because my children told me they're tired of listening to my cocktail stories. They said, if you're going to keep talking about this, why don't you just put it in a book? And I laughed at them and I thought, I probably could do that. So I started just writing down things that happened. I kept flight logs, all my logs. I still have them. And I just started writing down things that happened. And as it went along, like I said before, I felt like Forrest Gump because it seemed like all my stories were sort of weird. Other people didn't have this stuff happen to them. So I kept writing until I couldn't write anymore. And then I turned it into a book.
That's great. There are aviation in and of itself comes up with some characters that you run across throughout your career. And like the gentleman you talked about who managed the maintenance on that fifth engine that was transported. Tell us maybe one story. Give us one good nugget out of the book that people could look forward to engrossing themselves in.
Oh boy, there's so many. Well, I'll tell you this one. This one was very interesting. People think flight attendants don't pay attention to anything because they're so busy doing, things that they do, picking up napkins or whatever they're doing. They're not really paying attention. I had a flight that had a 7-hour flight plan from JFK to San Francisco. That's a long flight plan. Normally it's about 6 hours. The flight only has 60 passengers on a Boeing 707. I was working in the back. And I noticed this man, and he sat in a middle seat. Now, the plane's wide open. You could sit wherever you wanted to, but he sat in the middle seat, and he had on a really cheap green leather kind of jacket. I was feeling like, he needed a little attention, so I tried to hang it. He told me to go away. He didn't eat. He didn't want to watch the free movie. He never did anything but sit there. And, that started bothering me. So I wrote this all down where he was seated, what was going on. And I didn't think about it anymore until 3 months later when our plane came in from, I think, Dayton, Ohio. And I got you get a call from the front of the airplane, put your hair up. My hair was always down and it wasn't supposed to be. So they called me and said, put your hair up. There's a supervisor on the jetway and there's 2 guys and we think they're cops. So I went up there to check in, and true enough, they were police, and they took me downstairs. I looked at photographs of men, and I picked out 2 of them, which I thought were brothers. Turns out they had killed a man, and they had flown on my airplane as an alibi. One of the brothers did. And so these police officers, when I picked them out, took me to a courtroom, covered my uniform up with one of their brown leather or brown coats, and took me to the courtroom, and he was sitting right in front of me, so that was positive ID. So 2 years later, they showed up again, and I went to court, and I ID'd him, and they're still in jail.
doing your civic duty, right?
I don't know. I thought it was fun at first, but until they came to get me and take me back to New York, back to Hoboken, New Jersey, of all places.
Did they pay you for that journey?
No, they did not.
Jeez Louise, can't get nothing.
But they told me they were going to buy me a ticket, and I said, I'm not flying, coach. Oh, it's okay. I'll go first class on my passes, which I did.
Now, as a TWA employee, I've heard some interesting stories on passes and family passes. Do you have any good stories about your travels?
Well, not really. I mean, we didn't fly coach. If you're a flight attendant, if you're in uniform, our flights were never that full. We never did the math on that. I could never get on a Delta flight on a pass, but could I always get on my own airline? But now that I'm older and I realize how it works, that's why TWA is not here anymore and Delta is. So I still can't get on Delta, by the way, on my passes. But it's just because the public is, flying a lot more and the airlines are trying to make money. They're just trying to make money.
It doesn't help to have empty seats.
Mm-mm.
When we very first moved up to the facility, we had opened an aircraft paint shop because TWA had their own paint shop here. And so a gentleman had come in that was doing some services for us related to the haz waste, and having this dialogue with him. He goes, well, my parents were crew for TWA, and he grew up here in Kansas City. And he told me a story of him and his brother using their crew passes when their parents were gone for a weekend, and they went to Disney Paris. And he said they went first class, just showed up at the airport with their ID, and I paid $7 to be in first class or something each way, and flew to Paris to go to Disney in Paris, what an amazing adventure for a couple of young people on a $7 first class ticket.
I can tell you that we used to get tickets on Pan Am out of JFK. We could go to Puerto Rico for $5 round trip on a 747. We used to go there all the time and get our TANs figured out. But I did have one opportunity to really try to miss my flight. I was down, I think I was in South America. Came home, I was going to fly. I thought I was going to fly from Miami up to JFK and take my flight. Had my uniform. I could not get on an airplane. So I ended up flying JFK nonstop to LA, then LA nonstop to JFK back again. I had to do a round trip on my own airline so I could pick up my flight. You never went anywhere unless you had a big window of opportunity because you could never tell.
Sounds pretty amazing time to be in aviation. That's for sure.
It was fun.
We struggle to get employees now because I think people only see some of the challenging sides of it, but it sounds like there were some pretty great adventures for you guys.
Oh, yeah. We had a good time. And, we didn't know it at the time. We didn't know that we were the movie stars of the 70s. We didn't appreciate the job that we had to go through a grooming instructor every time we went on an airplane. They had to make sure our makeup was perfect. And I don't think we really appreciated it until now, really.
Yeah. A little different today when the flight crews start out. I think a lot of them start with the regional guys, and you're flying, 45 minutes to an hour at a clip. You're doing that 6 or 7 times in a day. That's a pretty taxing day. Well, I ask all of my podcast guests what their favorite aircraft is and why. I'm going to guess in my head, but maybe you can enlighten us on what your favorite aircraft is and why.
Well, I'm sure you all know that my favorite aircraft is the 747. It was my second aircraft, and then, of course, the one I jumped out of. I didn't really get off the airplane. I had an evacuation, but everybody that got on it was in awe. We did everything first class, everything. Our coach section, everything was clean. It was brilliant. It smelled good. It smelled like a new car, and it was just wonderful. And then, unless you've flown on a 747, you wouldn't appreciate that drone of that engine when you're taking off and it's going to lift off. We would often, and I don't know how we afforded this, maybe that's why we're not here anymore, but we used to ferry 747s. Ferrying is when only your crew's on board with no passengers across the ocean. You get on there and you turn the music on and it would just be like heaven. Yeah. It's my favorite plane. It was big. It was difficult to work. There was 342 people on the airplane. We were constantly trading food around, making sure we had enough choices in the back. Everybody got what they needed. It was just, it's a great time in aviation.
That's outstanding. Or is there anything else you'd like to maybe enlighten our listeners on, or maybe a story that didn't make your book? Maybe the alternate story. We have great at editing, so we can bleep out anything you need us to. But is there anything else you'd like to enlighten us with?
What I do want people to read my book. And the reason I want them to read my book is to have a good time and to remember what it was like. And if you're too young to know, at least you can see what it was like. And for the women that always wanted to be hostesses/stewardesses/flight attendants, this book will give you an insight on what it was really like. And the women that have read it have loved it. And I've had a lot of readers say to me, women say to me, I always wanted to do that job. We had so many restrictions, so few people. But I know that when I joined TWA, there were 10,000 applicants for 1,000 jobs.
Wow.
It was a hard job to get. And of course, I was just trying to get a job. I wasn't even thinking about the glamorous part of being flight attendant.
So imagine if your fiance would have not bailed on you there. Life might have looked a lot different.
I would have been a farmer out in Oklahoma, probably. I don't know. I'm just thankful he did. And, we're not friends anymore, but we do know where we are.
Well, that's pretty reasonable. And it sounds like ultimately the choice was the best one for you. So it's great how life gets you.
Vietnam changed a lot of people. It was a tough time.
Yeah.
So I forgive him.
There are stories in here that I haven't gotten out of you yet that I'm going to look forward to getting out of you. So there's stories on the sidelines. So
there's no sex in there, which really upset everybody, even Greg Harper. There's no sex in there because I have 6 children and 12 grandchildren, and I didn't want my legacy to be that. But there's plenty of sex in there.
It's between the lines.
Oh God, yeah. These women, we were just wild women. Some of us had never been anywhere, done anything. You get to New York City, baby. And you think about it. Our rent was $1,250 a month. Our base pay was $250 a month times 5. Didn't take long to figure the math out. So the only way you made money was by flying. And we found out that it was almost impossible to get flights. So they gave us free bus tickets. So I would pack my suitcase and go to the airport every day. I'd call operations. I'd say, hi, it's Dianna. I'm here. And I would just stay at the airport all day long, hoping for somebody to call in sick or something happen. And I ended up getting this stack of commendation letters from people at the airport. And my supervisor's like, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm just there waiting for a flight. But I came home with money. I had things to pay off, like my wedding rings that I co-signed for. My brother did. Had to pay those off.
That's amazing. So listen, you've got more stories. That's going to yield another book. Do you have a title yet?
I don't know. I've been thinking Jump Seat Revisited, there are people that have read it that said, what happened to us and what happened? And I'm like, oh gosh, I can't, but I'm going to have to rewrite it. I don't know. Jump Seat Revisited, Jump Seat number 2.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we will be waiting and we'll make sure that we update all of our listeners when it comes out.
Oh.
Maybe you and I can have another moment to sit down when that comes out and we can
That'd be fun.
do a little book review again and prod you for even more answers as to the wild times it was to be in the Jump Seat.
Yep.
Well, I appreciate it. Where can people find Jump Seat, your book?
Amazon.com.
That makes it easy because if you don't have Amazon, I'm not sure how you're surviving or watching our podcast.
You have to put Jump Seat Jet Setting in the 70s because if you just put Jump Seat, you're going to get all kinds of good stuff. But that's what you need to do. That's how they set it up. Perfect.
And again, to all the Nose to Tail podcast listeners out there, it's been a great conversation with Dianna. Be sure and grab her book, Jump Seat Jet Setting in the 70s. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Nose to Tail. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Presented by Jet Midwest.